All right, well, tonight we are discussing access to cannabis oil. What exactly is cannabis oil? What are the different types of cannabis oil, and how does access play a role in this? Now, I'm going to make the argument, contrary, that while access is extremely important ultimately when we want to treat the patient and also when we are fighting across the country to get various laws changed, access is one of the biggest issues because of the fact that, obviously with the way the laws are set up now, we have to grow it in the particular state if we want to be able to legally distribute it to the patient and help people. But I'm kind of making the argument tonight that access in its current form can also be dangerous to the movement at large. And and why is that? How does access in its current form for most people, obviously I'm not talking about people that actually live in Colorado or Washington or Oregon, but for people that live in other parts of the states where they don't have as much access to it, or specifically the right type of access. So I've been asked to write a blog, an article. It's quite lengthy, so I'm going to do a video blog of that written article for cannabis.net. And I'm trying to kind of follow along with the article that I wrote. So I'm actually using notes tonight. I don't normally do that. But so let's get down to it. Access. How does that affect the legislative movement, and how does it affect the movement at large? Because ultimately, we are trying to convince the country that has experienced 50 years of horrific, bad propaganda against the cannabis plant. We're trying to convince them that we're dealing with legitimate medicine. And in order to do that, we have to do things a certain way. And so I have attempted in various Facebook posts on my own to point out what I consider a very important piece of the puzzle, so to speak, and that is cannabis oil. And what do we do as leaders to understand where the average parent is coming from? The parent that doesn't fully understand everything and know all the details that maybe we do that have been in the trenches on this issue for years. What is it like from their point of view, from their perspective? Because frankly, they may have a child dealing with epilepsy or autism, or they have an uncle that has cancer, and they've seen, the Facebook video of the child that cannabis oil helped, or the cancer patient that it cured, so forth and so on. But that's about all they know. And maybe the state that they live in, maybe they have passed laws where it's legal under certain conditions, or it's legal to possess, but they're having to go to extreme measures to actually get it. So where does the average parent start? Not you or I potentially, but the average parent that just learned about this. Well, they're going to start with a Google search, because that's where we start with everything this day and age. So what's the first thing that's going to pop up more than likely? CBD oil, pure CBD oil, legal in all 50 states. You can get it at the health store right down the street. Well, I'm sure more than likely that CBD oil is certainly not harmful to anybody, but I don't think anybody would make the claim that that's really what they're looking for if they're dealing with cancer or autism or Parkinson's or severe epilepsy and so forth. So let's hope that they made it past that ad on Google. What's the next step? Now, more than likely the next step, or what they're going to be faced with, is companies out there such as Charlotte's Web, Haley's Hope, Palmetto Harmony. All three of those companies, and I'm sure there's others out there that I'm not familiar with, all three of those companies have done absolute wonders for the movement as a whole. And quite frankly, all of us owe a debt of gratitude to the creators of those oils. Because not only have they actually saved lives of children and adults battling with epilepsy, but they have really served to educate the general public. But the issue that I want to address has a little bit to do with that. But there again, it's all about understanding the unknowns out there from the average parent's point of view. So how is medicine treated? Because ultimately that's what we want. We want the society as a whole to understand and to think about cannabis oil and the cannabis plant as medicine. So let's walk down that path there. When you go to the doctor, and people have access to doctors, regardless of what you want to talk about our health, industry here in America. We have one of the best medical fields out there. I mean, that's just, so you've got a doctor that prescribes a particular type of medicine for a particular condition that patient is facing. So then what happens next? Well, then they have a whole staff to help that parent get the prescription, and then they send them off to the pharmacist. The pharmacist has a whole entire staff of people to answer their questions about dosing. Well, what does that look like in the medical cannabis oil industry? And how can we take that process and transfer it over to the cannabis oil industry? And if we don't have it, what are the potential pitfalls? And that's one of my points that I want to address tonight, because obviously for the average citizen out there tonight, they don't have that. If you don't live in Colorado or Oregon or Washington, it's very difficult to have that process lined up. So ultimately, so here in Georgia, I can only speak about Georgia, but I know that a lot of states out there, we have the issue to where parents can legally possess it. They can treat their children or themselves if they have certain conditions to meet the guidelines. The problem here in Georgia, and I know Alabama, our neighbor to the west, just passed a similar law where we can use it, but we have absolutely no legal way to purchase it. So therefore, where do we go? Do we go to the black market? Because, frankly, the way our law here in Georgia is written, it's literally telling us to, go to another state and break their laws, break federal laws, and hope you make it back here to Georgia. Or the alternative is, if you want to stay within the state of Georgia, just go buy any old, weed off the street, process it in your kitchen, and just hope that whatever you come up with is actually what your child or yourself needs to treat conditions X, Y, and Z. Obviously, that's not a very effective process. So for parents here in Georgia, where do they go? Well, they start this whole process that I described earlier in the video of, what's CBD oil? All they know is cannabis oil. Well, they maybe heard that CBD is one particular aspect of cannabis oil. Well, do they turn to the hemp oils that I mentioned earlier with, Haley's Hope or Charlotte's Web or so forth? The question is effectiveness, and that's kind of the theme of this discussion tonight. It's not just enough to have access. If we as a movement are not focused on effectiveness, then access can actually do more damage than good. Because I can just describe to you my story. My wife and I refused to treat our child because it was illegal for 18 months. And we finally made that decision. And for us, that was a very big decision to cross over that threshold of breaking the law to treat our autistic son. So where did we turn? Well, we turned to the only place that we knew of that we could legally purchase it, and that was to the hemp oil. So my experience, I visited the website that somebody sent me a link to. It's a very professional website and it's great information. Then they, sent me to a page where they had a list of different bottles. There were 2 there. I chose one, clicked on it, went to the next page, paid for it, put in my address, click, shipped it to my house. Here's the problem with that, though. Where in that process of selecting a bottle of oil that I frankly had no idea what one bottle versus this bottle was the difference, where was the question where they asked me, what are you trying to treat? And where was the information about dosing? Now, I'm sure there's some, helpline or Facebook chat group set up for dosing questions. But the most important issue is I understand laws. I understand that currently right now those hemp oils are the only oils that are legal to ship across the country. And that's great. And that is saving people's lives every single day. But for the sake of the movement at large, it's important that, in my opinion, and especially from a autistic dad's perspective, there needs to at least be some type of disclaimer on that saying, obviously there's no known negative side effects with these hemp oils, but this particular ratio of oil may not be the best ratio for what you're trying to treat. Now, for epilepsy in particular, more than likely, it is exactly what they need, and it works wonderfully. It's an amazing medicine, but maybe not for autism. Now, for some, I'm sure that many have tried it and seen great results. But my son in particular is extremely autistic. And after ordering my bottle of oil, I then learned that strains that are extremely high in CBD and very low in THC actually increase negative characteristics that are typically associated with extreme autistic children. So I personally never tried it. Not luckily, but I have plenty of friends that have children battling epilepsy, so I let them have that bottle. And I went and did more research and found a different, more effective particular ratio to treat autism. So at the end of the day, what are we doing as leaders in the industry to help educate the parents and the patients on the different oils out there? Because again, I'm going to argue that we are after effective medicine, not just access to oil, not just access to something. And if there are certainly issues that could come up when we have parents out there, they're getting access to something, but it's not what their parent or their child or themselves need. So what's the potential negative if I would not have been involved like I am with people that know much more so about cannabis oil in general than I do, and thankfully they inform me about the potential negative side effects to high CBD, low THC oil in treating autism. But what if I wouldn't have known that? How would that affect the movement at large? Well, the alternative, if I would have continued down that path, is one, obviously my son could have gotten worse as far as his stimming and the like. And, I could have bought 2 or 3 or 4 bottles of oil and said, well, I know it's going to work out. I know it's going to get better. Well, what if it didn't get better? What would have been the natural conclusion for me, just the average parent? Well, worst case scenario, if no one would have ever told me, well, you know what, maybe you need to look at this different oil instead of what you've been doing because of your particular child's condition, well then, more than likely the conclusion I would have come to as the average parent is I would have thrown my hands up and I would have said, this is all a scam. This is all a hoax. Cannabis isn't real medicine, so forth and so on. And there again, I had access, but did I have access to the right type of team and to the right information and to the right oil. So, I mean, there again, my point is not that there's any really bad oil out there at all. Quite frankly, I mean, that's the great thing about cannabis and cannabis oil in particular is there's really no known negative side effects, but we're after effective treatment. And we have to convince society at large that cannabis really is medicine. And the only way we're going to do that is if we are able to show them how effective it is. And the only way it's going to be effective is if we have the right type of access. So, what is the solution? Now, there again, I can only talk about what we're specifically doing here in Georgia. I'm sure that there are similar setups and groups out there in all the other states, and obviously we know what's going on in Colorado and even California, where it's been legalized for a very long time. But here in Georgia, this is what we're doing. It's most conditions are not really covered here in Georgia, especially autism is still not legally covered. So when we have a parent who's finally come to that conclusion, look, my child's well-being is on the line. I'm willing to take that jump to cross over that legal threshold. Or, I mean, they may be covered legally. Of course, they don't have a legal way to purchase it. But so they come to myself or one of my friends and they say, look, I want to look into this. So what's the next step? Well, the process in which we do is we have a team, and I think it's important that it's a team specifically made up of families that are treating their children or themselves with cannabis oil, because we know what it's like to go through that process. And so we built a team that very well educated. We have a network that we're working with. And the last thing we want them to do is to have to, process it in their kitchen and not have it lab tested and not know if it's the right medicine for them again. So with our team, what we've done is we have, instead of asking, all, let's just say 10,000 patients in Georgia that potentially could use cannabis oil, instead of asking them to travel out and break laws in other states, a very small group of us have kind of gathered together to build our team. We've went out to Nevada, Oregon, Washington, and Colorado, and built a network of other people out there that have agreed to help us with information, help us with lab tested concentrates, and actually develop very specific ratios and strains to help the people here in Georgia. So someone finally makes that decision that they want to use cannabis oil. They come to myself. I put them in contact with my team. The very first thing that we do is we have them fill out a medical form because, obviously there again, everybody doesn't just need cannabis oil. Everybody needs the specific ratio or strain to treat them or their child. It's all different. And so we want to know the history. We want to know what medication are you currently taking so that we know of any potential complications mixing the two. We want to know what are you coming off of and to replace with cannabis oil. So we get very detailed information about the oil. Plus we include them as part of our team. It can only be effective if you have those lines of communication there, because every person is different. Everybody's going to react differently to different levels of CBG, CBN, CBD, THC, THCA. Everybody, your human body is different. So we try very hard to maintain that communication at all times with asking questions, getting answers to their questions, and to helping them through their fears. And part of, at least for us here in Georgia, you got fears concerning the law, helping to educate them on, giving them access to lawyers, for instance, or just people that can answer their questions. So we've handled the situation as far as, getting the oil or getting the various strains of the oil. And then ultimately, the team kind of makes a recommendation based on the specific person that is being treated, the specific condition that they have, and the oils that are available at that time. And then once they make that decision, then we put them in contact with the people that can actually get them the oil. So there again, it's all about effectiveness. It's not just about access. So the actual getting the oil is only, one step, but it's only most important after you've done steps, 1 through 8 into determining what the right type of oil is out there. So, ultimately where we're going to, and the whole point of this, if hopefully I've made any sense tonight, is that the right type of access is when it's something that's going to happen, because we cannot, as a movement, we cannot afford to have parents out there that just went and got something on the black market that I'm sure would have helped somebody, but it didn't help them. It didn't help their child or their dad. And they're going to then leave there thinking that this is all a scam, it's all a hoax. So we as the industry, and there again, I don't necessarily claim to be the biggest leader or whatever. I certainly don't know the most out there, but I think that I bring something important to the table, that I still remember what it's like to have all of these questions that the average parent has. And it's important that we as leaders across the country, we don't lose sight of that we continue to think, okay, how is the average parent seeing and understanding and processing this information? Because more than likely, they know very little, and that's the norm. And most importantly, they're scared because most of them are actually breaking laws, and they're not accustomed to breaking laws in order to treat their child or a family member or themselves. So, ultimately, we know cannabis oil works. It works for a variety of conditions. We know it is medicine, but for the sake of the movement, we must protect access. And as someone who has lobbied at our local capital in Atlanta for years, we've always lobbied for access. We got to have access. We got to have access. And we do. But frankly, for us in Georgia and for Alabama and a lot of other states, we don't have it right now. But it's important that we understand, okay, where does that leave us at? And where that leaves us is in a very dangerous place. And we have to understand the situation that we're left in, and we have to make sure that we're doing our part in educating parents and patients to what is the difference. And it's not just about, our oil or the oil that can be shipped, or certainly not the CBD oil at the health food store. But, it's all about helping and understanding the perspective of the uneducated parent, because that's the majority of them out there. And so it's certainly not, I want to be extremely clear about this, that, the companies that I mentioned earlier, Charlotte's Web and Haley's Hope and Palmetto Harmony, once again, this has no negative on them whatsoever. There's no question in my mind that those are amazing companies, and they have done so much to save so many lives. It's just a matter of pointing out the differences Just like, you point out the differences in this pure CBD at health food stores. And okay, great. That's a good multivitamin. Not going to hurt anybody. But it's not Haley's Hope. And Haley's Hope is absolutely wonderful. And I know so many families that it has been, life-changing for them. And I even know autistic children that are using Haley's Hope. And it's working out well for them. It's more of just understanding that for every condition out there, and especially there again, I'm more passionate about autism. The more extreme autistic cases, you need different oils. At the end of the day, that's it. It's all about understanding, and we as leaders in the movement have to be willing to admit and understand that oils are different. Different conditions require different oils, and that's okay. So we have to tell people, we have to educate parents and patients about the differences, because the legally hemp oils, well, it's a lot different when you start talking about THCA ratios to THC and all of the different more we'll just call them more potent ratios that are used to treat severe cases of autism and MS and cancer and Parkinson's and PTSD and bipolar conditions and so forth. So I hope that process, and I hope that I was able to get my point across, that it's not just about access. Ultimately, for the sake of the movement, it has to be about effective treatment. And I know that so many in the industry, that is the focus. We want to help people, but over time, sometimes we can lose perspective from the uneducated parent or the person who has just recently been given a cancer diagnosis. We can't lose sight of that. And it's important that for those of us that are still fighting to change laws in the states we live in, when we're helping to pass those laws, we need to keep this in mind. What is this access going to look like? And is it going to be effective? And if you're living in one of those states where you kind of have access, or you kind of have a legal way to use it, but you don't really have access, find people out there, help set up the process like we've done here in Georgia. It can be done. Luckily, we have a lot of sympathy on our side. And I think that the success that we've seen and the success I think that we're going to see with passing laws here in Georgia is going to have a lot to do with and a result of the process that we set up here. Our goal is we want to make sure that the parent, the patient, gets access to the medicine that is most effective for them. And ultimately, and a lot of times, if that means that we don't have access to that particular oil they need, then we tell them that. And then we try our best to get them in contact with somebody else that does have that particular oil that they need. And I know that and I'm sure that there are people out there, other groups out there all around the country that are doing something similar. I'm just here tonight to kind of point out the importance. It's not about access. Access is important. The right kind of access is the most important. And the wrong type of access to just any old oil out there could be doing more damage than good. But it's a long fight, and we're all trying our best to just do what we can to help people. And ultimately, we all know we're going to win this battle when it's all said and done. And a lot of people are going to get helped by this plant. So thank you very much. Hope you probably read the article a lot faster than the 29 minutes it took me to make this video. So thank you.